Hey, what's going on, guys? So today I'm going to have a nice long presentation for you over the effects of testosterone. So first of all, why should you listen to me? I'm 23 years old right now, and I began using testosterone when I was 18 years old. And now at 23 years old, I have come off of it, and I no longer use any form of testosterone anymore. This was recently that I came off. In the meantime, between 18 and now, I used anabolic androgenic steroids. And so since then, I've learned quite a bit about using it. And then in my more recent past, researching for this video and researching all the different, side effects of anabolic steroids and testosterone, I've learned quite a bit. And so we're going to be walking through that with you today. So first, I have a couple of premises that I'm going to give to you and then explain in this video. So first of all, low dose TRT, so low dose testosterone, not anabolic steroids, just using testosterone, even at low doses, does not equal being natural. It does not. Okay? Number two, steroids are terrible for you. All right, we're going to get into that in kind of the second half of this presentation, and then after I explain everything that's on the board, I'm going to bring you guys through how I actually got off of testosterone and some of the things I learned along the way. Number three, TRT is not safe. TRT is not safe. Testosterone replacement therapy is not safe, guys. I'm going to explain it to you. And fourthly, testosterone does not decrease with age, actually. A lot of doctors even will say that testosterone decreases with age. This just isn't true. It just isn't. So let's just go point by point, all right? First premise, low dose TRT does not equal natural. So I'm going to explain to you guys a lot of things that I'm sure you guys have not heard from anybody, even people who talk about the side effects of steroids. I'm going to talk about some that you probably have heard before, but definitely get into stuff that you have not heard before. And this is all pulled from actual scientific reviewed literature. So first off, with testosterone not being natural, is that when you inject it, again, right now we're just talking about testosterone, the natural hormone that's in your body. If you inject it into your body, number one, even if you use the same dosage that you would be using naturally, which isn't possible, and this is why. When you inject it, it's going to be connected to what's called an ester. And the ester is this little molecule that's attached to the testosterone molecule, and it goes through your liver, and your liver takes off this ester, this molecule that's attached to your testosterone, and it breaks it down into, the ester and then the testosterone molecule. And then the testosterone molecule can go and do the different things that it does in your body. Because of this, it stays in your body for an extended period of time, okay? So different esters are broken down at different rates of time. And so they're, the normal ones are cypionate, ACE, you don't normally see that in testosterone, enanthate, you also have, those are the main two, enanthate and cypionate. You also have propionate, which is a very quick one, which is interesting. We'll kind of talk about that in a minute. You also have decanate, undecanate. Those are longer ones. But when you inject it with a needle, it stays. Your body will begin breaking it down immediately, and it will peak at a certain time. Your blood level of testosterone. Because if you inject testosterone, again, it's attached to a different molecule. Technically, it's not testosterone. It's not bioactive. It doesn't do anything until your liver takes off that ester. Well, again, it has this time that it does this over. And so this testosterone, you inject it and it begins rising in your blood levels, and then it peaks, and then it starts going down. All right? Now, this is usually over roughly about a week period. that it goes up and then begins to come down. Well, naturally in your body, your testosterone that you make is generated in pulsatile secretion fashion, is what it's called. And so naturally, for a natural human who doesn't inject any hormones, the increase is most in the morning times, right after you wake up. Your testosterone is peaked. And then because your body produces testosterone in its normal form with no ester, it is broken down very quickly, actually, through the day. And so when it peaks in the morning, it's at its highest. If you test your blood level in the morning, it's at its highest. And then through the later morning hours and into the evening and even afternoon, it decreases. And then in the earlier afternoon, it increases again. You'll have another spike, and then through the night, it will decrease again. And then in the morning, you'll get another spike. This is called pulsatile secretion. And there's reasons for this pulsatile secretion that we're going to be getting into. But all you need to know for right now, for this first premise, is that when you inject it, you have chronically elevated testosterone level. So you get your blood tested in the morning, it is at whatever amount that you injected into your body. And then later in the day, it is still at that same level. Again, these esters normally they have around like a 4 to 8 day half-life. So only half of it is broken down after 5 to 8 days, basically. And so it just stays the same. So in the morning, you have testosterone right here. In the afternoon, you have testosterone right here. When you go to sleep, you have testosterone right here. It's always at the same level, and there's a lot of problems with that. Second main premise is that steroids are terrible for you. Now, I'm not going to prove that to you right now. We're going to be getting into that in a little bit. But everyone knows steroids are bad for you. But one note I will say up front is that people talk about the side effects of steroids, and most people that I hear talking about it, they say, oh, you are at risk of these things happening. There is a risk that these side effects will happen to you. Well, unfortunately, and I'm not going to pass any judgment on anybody. What you want to do in your life is up to you. I'm just here to give the information. But these are not risks of happening. All these things will happen to you to varying different levels, and it is in fact dose dependent. It depends on how much you take. If you take a small amount, little of these side effects may happen, or still the same for some of them, they will still happen. But if you take more of these side effects will happen to you. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of how much is it going to happen to you. And that is up to how much dose that you use. That's just the facts. Nobody wants to hear that. Not all the side effects that are possible to happen will happen. There's different genetic predispositions, such as some people won't lose their hair. That's a pretty small side effect that most people have heard about. The least of my worries after reading about it. But all the other side effects, they will happen to varying degrees. And so that's just something you have to remember. These are not a question of if they will happen, it's a question of how much will they happen. Second is TRT is not safe. So that's basically going to be what we're talking about in this video. But again, first of all, going back to this one, is that people think it's safe because, oh, it's the same as being natural. Well, number one, why are you wanting to use it if it's the same as being natural? But number two, no, it is not the same as being natural, because you have a different pulsatile secretion. You don't have pulsatile secretion. Even if you correlate the doses, even if you use the same doses that you would produce, well, that would be stupid, because it wouldn't work. Because normally you have a spike and then it goes down. So if you were to look at through the day, you have a spike and then it goes down and then you have another spike, just like this. And if you were to correlate for the dosage by injecting it, your baseline would just be down here. It would be ridiculous, and you'd never get that spike. you'd never be up here where you should be, and so you are always using more dosage than you would naturally use. And we know that that is not safe. So the fourth premise is that testosterone does not decrease with age. So most everybody that I hear talk about this, with the exception of Michael Hearn, actually. Michael Hearn is the only influencer that I hear tell us that testosterone does not decrease with age, and it's true. Now, honestly, scientifically, I can't say that it is true that it doesn't decrease. And the reason for this is because the research is very muddied, in fact. But from my read of the literature, and as far as I can tell, what the literature just says is that yes, testosterone does decrease with age on average. However, we have almost certainly a causal reason for this, and it's not age. Aging does not decrease testosterone. Lapses, faults, and degeneration of people's lifestyles over time is what decreases testosterone. And so when we, in your normal study that will study testosterone changes over the lifespan, will show that individuals on average decrease. Okay, but when we look at specific samples of the population, such as older individuals that still live healthy lifestyles, that eat healthily, that exercise frequently, and that regularly weight train naturally, they actually still have basically the same level that a healthy individual at a young age will have. In fact, one study that I remember reading actually showed that a sample of the population of older individuals that lived very healthy lifestyles, that ate very healthily, exercised regularly, and overall had certain lifestyle markers that would indicate a healthy lifestyle, actually had better testosterone levels, higher testosterone levels than a non-equivalent sample of individuals of a healthy age that didn't live healthy lifestyles. So older individuals, 40, 50 plus years of age, had more testosterone in their bodies than people, say my age, in their 20s, who didn't live healthy lifestyles. How does testosterone decrease with age? It doesn't. It only does on a population-wide scale because of lifestyle factors. So those are my premises, and let's just get into some of these bullet points. So first one is that TRT, circulating testosterone, is chronic. We already covered that. So your testosterone level is always at whatever point you put it to, however much you inject into yourself. Okay, the effects of this, the effects, number one, equal higher total exposure, okay, to testosterone than a natural. So we kind of briefly covered this. Think about this. Again, because naturally you have, this is when you wake up, you have a peak, and then it goes down, and then it peaks again, then it goes down, because the half-life of testosterone, the molecule itself that your body produces naturally, is very, very short. Again, it decreases through the day. And so even over a handful of hours, your testosterone can decrease by as much as 2, 3, even 400 nanograms per deciliter. The reference range is something like 300 to 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. That's the units that we're working with. And so over just a handful of hours, you can decrease by as much as like 400 nanograms per deciliter just through the day. So that is quite substantial. That shows the half-life. It's very short. It's a matter of hours. And so if you are injecting it with TRT, okay, you can't match for total milligram exposure. Let's say normal people, a normal healthy individual of my age, a male, will produce something like 7 milligrams per day, something like this. So that's 7 times 7 over a week, which equals 49 milligrams in a whole week, okay? If you know anybody taking testosterone, they don't take 49 milligrams a week. They take something like 100 to 150 or more, but most everyone accepts that if you're taking more than that, it's not really replacement therapy. But so a normal natural is producing like 50 milligrams a week, and that's a healthy individual too. And we already know that people are injecting more milligrams than that. And you can tell me about the fact that the milligrams that you see on a vial don't line up with the actual milligrams of testosterone, and that's true because they count it by the molecular weight, and the testosterone is already attached to a molecule ester, so it makes it heavier. But even still, accounting for that, you're still taking too many milligrams. And if you just think about it, it makes sense, again, because you have the increase and then down, then increase again, and that's your whole day. And if you were to level that curve off, okay, you would be somewhere like peak right here, and this is the bottom. You'd be like right here. And so again, because it's chronic exposure, it would have to stay in that one spot, and you would be staying down here, okay, where you'd be at like some of your lowest parts of the day. And so it doesn't, well, slightly higher than that. So it doesn't make sense. And so nobody takes milligrams equated to a natural. Everyone takes more because you peak right here. They want to be up here. They want to be at the peak 24/7. Okay. But there's a lot of problems with that. All right. So that's the first point. Second point. Okay. This is less of a side effect per se. Technically it's a side effect, but this is more of just a physiological thing that happens, is because you are chronically being exposed to this testosterone, and because you are using more than your body wants you to have, your body wants you to have what you would produce naturally. But if you're taking TRT, unless you have an actual medical condition, such as primary or secondary hypogonadism, you are taking more testosterone than your body naturally wants you to have. And so your testosterone receptors, what are called the androgen receptors, they do what's called down-regulate or decrease their sensitivity, okay? And so there's a couple different mechanisms of how they do that. We don't need to get into that. Long story short, your receptors become less activated by testosterone. So you might have this sky-high level of testosterone swirling around in your bloodstream, but your actual receptors that are meant to take in this testosterone and produce the response that probably you're looking for, they actually become desensitized and they don't work as well. And that's just what happens. This, again, the side effects of this, I mean, there could be some side effects, but not really. This is just a protective mechanism. This is a protective mechanism that your body uses to keep from getting side effects. Okay, so number one, since we know that the receptor sensitivity goes down, we know that we're doing something that our body doesn't want us to do. Okay? But less of a side effect and more of just a physiological response. Number two is chronic inflammation. Now, you never hear anybody talk about this, but yes, if you look in the literature, if you have testosterone levels that are chronically elevated, even within the reference range, again, you might be within the reference range, but you're always at the same level. And so whenever you get blood tested, you're always there. You're not supposed to always be there. You're supposed to hit maybe the top of the reference range, 1,000 nanograms per deciliter, and then quickly come back down. But most people who take TRT, they go 1,000 milligrams and they're at nanograms per deciliter, and they're always there, and it's true. No one can deny this. If you look at the literature, you have, as a result of this, chronic inflammation. It is inflammatory to the body. And you can tell me, Luke, it's not true. Testosterone is safe and effective, and it's not steroids, it's just testosterone. But the fact of the matter is that no, it makes chronic inflammation. I mean, that's just the truth, okay? Number 3, heart disease risk, your risk for heart disease. It goes up, everyone knows this. Well, maybe everyone doesn't know this. That's why you're listening to this. Heart disease risk goes up, yes. It is a product of a few things, a lot of things that kind of actually aren't really completely understood, or at least understood completely by me. It's a product of a few things. You get elevated blood pressure, you get elevated, basically, things in your blood. You get elevated certain blood cells, elevated hemoglobin, EPO, and different things. Well, EPO kind of helps, but it's negated. So your risk for heart disease goes up. No one can deny this. There's just no arguing it. You can tell me, oh, it's not that bad, but it just does. It just goes up, okay? Number 4, high blood pressure risk. Your risk for high blood pressure goes up, and it's not really a risk. Your blood pressure almost certainly just will go up, and that is a product of a handful of things. It's a contributory factor to the heart disease, and also it's a product of some other things that we're going to get into that are really interesting, that nobody talks about. Fifthly, large increased risk for prostate cancer. This is huge, actually. Not a lot of people talk about this, but you have a massive increase in the chances and the severity of prostate cancer. It's true because basically it's linear. Testosterone just makes prostate cancer. A lot of men develop prostate cancer. Normally, it's not something that they even really need to get taken care of. It's just their prostate enlarges over the lifespan, and when they die, they have a very enlarged prostate. Not a huge deal, but if you're at risk already of prostate cancer, this is a major deal, actually. And so that's, again, just another thing to think about, you know. So far, well, with the exception of the first one and the high blood pressure, most of these are kind of risks that are like, okay, these are things that we could measure of pros and cons in the absence of all the other side effects. But the circulating chronic level is extremely bad, and we're going to get into that. The high blood pressure is, again, contributory to other things and a product of some others, so that's pretty bad. Chronic inflammation, you will have chronic inflammation, but everyone has inflammation. It's something that will eventually kill you, but it's, you know, like, we accept chronic inflammation from eating slightly processed foods and stuff like that. Coffee maybe gives you inflammation, maybe takes away inflammation. It's probably dependent on other factors, but not a huge deal, right? But again, it's within the constellation of everything else that's going on. And it just, all these little things add up, and then some of these things are not so little that we've already covered and that we're going to get into. So increased prostate cancer, you have a low risk of damage to your liver and kidneys. Now, admittedly, this is basically benign, unless you're taking anabolic androgenic steroids. If you're just taking testosterone, especially at a lower dose, your liver and kidney damage is basically not a problem. Okay, next one, increased, but it is there. All right, next one, increased anxiety. So this is real as it gets. People talk about increased anxiety from steroids, and that is 100% just confirmed. Can confirm, actually. But nobody talks about increased anxiety with testosterone. And the fact of the matter is that it increases anxiety. So many people talk about testosterone decreasing anxiety. Oh, you want to get on TRT because it's going to decrease anxiety. First of all, okay, this is one I want to kind of stay on because there's a lot of important things to cover and a lot of things that were shocking, even to me. Okay, so first of all, when you read the literature on decreased anxiety as a product of testosterone, number one, it is in the context of clinically hypogonadal men. Okay, these are men, there's primary and secondary hypogonadism. That means that your gonads aren't working. Okay, you're either number one, your brain is not sending the signal to your balls to make testosterone. We're going to talk about that and get into that sort of stuff in a minute. Or number two, your brain is sending the signal to your balls, but your balls aren't making it. Okay, it's getting the signal, but it don't know how to make it for whatever reason. And that's a serious clinical issue, okay? And that's a small subset of the population. Not many people actually have hypogonadism, okay? And now you can have lifestyle factors that lead to you having a low testosterone level, but your bad mental health and anxiety is probably not from the low testosterone. It's from the contributory factors that led to you having low testosterone. So all these studies that are showing that anxiety is lowered with increased testosterone is number one within the backdrop of these being actually hypogonadal men, okay? The chances of you actually being hypogonadal are very low, all right? Number two is that this decrease in anxiety that people always talk about as a result of testosterone is within naturals, okay? It's not within people taking exogenous testosterone unless they are, again, hypogonadal as a product of their lifestyle, okay? So these are not healthy individuals that are taking exogenous testosterone and getting a decrease in anxiety. That does not happen. That has not been studied. Well, it has, and it actually increases anxiety. But all this talk about decrease in anxiety is number one because you have an actual medical condition and your balls and your brain are not doing what they need to do to make testosterone, okay, which is, again, a serious medical condition that you need to get looked at by an actual doctor, okay? And TRT is probably not, for those people, TRT is something that you have to get on, okay, when other things don't work, okay? The first thing a good doctor is going to do is look at trying to, number one, going upstream and figuring out where your body's not working, and then trying to fix it so your body can make it. That's the good thing to do, okay? And then if none of that works, then you take testosterone, okay? It's because of all the side effects that we don't want to go straight to that, okay? Or, so you're either hypogonadal or you're just living a terrible life, dude. You're eating terrible. You're not exercising regularly. You're probably obese. And your body's just not making a lot of testosterone. And taking testosterone in those populations has been shown to decrease anxiety. But for me personally, this is me speculating on the literature and what I've read in the literature, is that is not going to be sustained. It's going to lower over time that beneficial effect. And these people are going to still be in the same boat unless they change their lifestyle. That's just my 2 cents. Increased anxiety from testosterone. What has been shown is that, again, all the evidence for decreased anxiety is in specific populations, specific conditions, okay? If you are a normal, healthy individual, okay, taking testosterone is not going to decrease anxiety. It's just not. It's going to increase it, okay? There was 2 studies that I've read they were studying mice, okay? And what they showed is that they took, I'll talk about one specifically. They took healthy mice, they took healthy older mice. Make sure I'm recording. Yep. They took healthy older mice and they took healthy younger mice. And what they showed specifically for the younger mice is that they put them in a maze. It's a maze test with the mice, and one of the tests is to test for how anxious the mice are. Okay, there's a couple other tests, and I'll probably talk about that in a second. They put these mice in the maze, and then they have certain segments of the maze that are can be anxiety-inducing, that are scary to the mice. Places that look like there might be predators, and it's scary to the mice. And so what they did is they gave these younger mice one shot of testosterone, a single shot of testosterone, mimicking what you would see if naturally your testosterone raised. And it showed that the mice were more likely to explore segments of the maze that might induce anxiety. So it showed a decreased level of anxiety. They were less anxious in these scary places, and they also showed that upon the single injection of testosterone, that they also basically explored more. They were more exploratory, but they continued injecting these mice with testosterone. And over time, what was called chronic exposure to testosterone. So they were injecting these mice with the same testosterone that somebody would be taking on TRT. And they showed that after chronically taking it for 3 weeks, they showed that these mice became more anxious and also less exploratory. So they got lazier, and they also got more anxious. And those two studies did basically the same thing, and showed the same thing. Acute exposure, just one single dose, you are less anxious and more what was termed novelty seeking, kind of more exploratory. And with chronic exposure, you were less exploratory, and also more anxious. And that's just what it is. And you might say, Luke, that's mice. Come on, that's a terrible study. Whatever. Okay. Well, we're gonna get into kind of some of the underlying reasons for this that are completely non-refutable, and again will happen, just to varying levels depending on your dose. Some things that are pretty bad. But okay, increased anxiety. Next one, HPTA equals broken. Your HPTA is your hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis. Okay, it's also called HPGA, which is hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. It's this very complex system that connects your brain to your balls. Okay, and so this becomes broken. This doesn't work anymore. So what happens if you take steroids or even just you inject testosterone is, first I have to explain how testosterone gets made in your body. So your brain releases two molecules. They're called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So both these things go to your balls and respectively make your balls produce sperm and testosterone. And your pituitary releases these hormones, again, luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone respectively produce testosterone and sperm. Okay? Your pituitary releases them and go to your balls. Well, something makes your pituitary release those, and it's called gonadotropin releasing hormone. Well, this is getting farther up to where the literature is kind of new. It was kind of recently discovered that a specific molecule, we're pretty damn sure, releases gonadotropin releasing hormone, and it is called kisspeptin. Kisspeptin is produced in your brain, in the hypothalamus, and in different regions produces a gonadotropin and the kisspeptin. But your brain releases kisspeptin, which tells gonadotropin releasing hormone to be made, and then which tells luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone to be produced from the pituitary, and then it goes to your balls and tells testosterone and sperm to be made. Well, when you take testosterone, your body stops making all of those molecules, okay? To varying degrees, those molecules also do other things, and so your body still will produce, to varying levels, those molecules locally, in local tissue. It's very complex. Kisspeptin does other things, and so your brain probably still produces some kisspeptin, especially locally in some tissues. And gonadotropin releasing hormone also has local effects that also do other things. But for the most part, gonadotropin releasing hormone that produces luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone don't get made anymore. And also kisspeptin, as a result of the no need for gonadotropin releasing hormone, also stops being made more. And what happens as a result of this is that, obviously everyone knows, your balls shrink up and they get small. So you got small little pee-pee balls. And it's because the tissue, the cells that are in your balls just aren't working anymore. They don't need to do anything. And as a result of that, you don't produce any testosterone naturally. And also you can stop producing sperm as well. All these things are actually, in fact, dose dependent. So the amount of shutdown that your body goes through is time dependent and dose dependent as well. I hear people say that even if you inject testosterone once, your balls are going to shut off. That's not true. And they also say that it doesn't matter the dose that you take, your balls are going to stop working. That's also not true, to varying degrees. So there was one study, one mice, where they took these mice, and it was only over like a month period, but they subjected these mice to varying dosages of testosterone. The human equivalents, I did the numbers, the human equivalents basically were like 40 milligrams for a normal male of testosterone. They gave these mice, the equivalent in a male would be like 40 milligrams, 100 milligrams, and then they did like 500 milligrams or something would be the equivalent of a man. In the 40 milligrams of testosterone, they continued producing LH. I forgot how much specifically they were still producing. I think they were still producing like 40% or something. Don't quote me. They were still producing like 40%, and then in the 100 milligrams of testosterone, they were producing like 20% as much as they were before. And then after 100 milligrams, it was like 100% shutdown. They weren't producing anything. And this makes sense. So your body has negative and positive feedback loops. And so if you are making more if you were injecting more testosterone than your body would naturally produce, or equivalent to, well, your body says, well, we don't need any more testosterone. And so it gives negative feedback and tells your body to stop making the molecules that produce testosterone, tells your body to stop making testosterone. But if you are taking less than what your body needs to fulfill its physiological function, then your body will continue producing it. It will make up the difference. And that is exactly the thought process that I used when I came off of testosterone to help my body start producing testosterone better, quicker. And it seemed to work. But we're going to get into that after I'm wrapped up with this. So your HPTA will be broken. It's also time dependent. So that study on mice was only over, I think, like 21 days or 4 weeks or something. So it was really short. And I personally would speculate that over the long term, you would probably pretty much completely have complete shutdown, which is not good, not good. It's not just a outside, your balls are smaller. That's not the only thing. Infertility, you'll stop producing sperm more than likely, and then you'll stop producing these molecules that your body is supposed to make that also do other things in the body to varying degrees, and it can completely throw off your hormone profile, basically. It does throw off your hormone profile, but even more so than just the testosterone that you're injecting. It can change a lot of things in your hormone profile, which have basically unknown consequences. Okay. Next one is lower cognitive performance. So this is actually completely true. You will have lower cognitive performance. You have extreme cognitive deficit with anabolic androgenic steroid use, and again, this is dose dependent. But even with just TRT, you can have lower cognitive performance. I did put a question mark next to this because it's not been shown that these smaller doses of androgens that would be seen on like a doctor prescribed TRT. Now, if you're taking like larger doses, like what people call like sports TRT, I'm thinking sports TRT, bro. He's taking like 200 milligrams or more. That's way high, and you are gonna have lower cognitive performance. What's been shown in the literature is that basically we can't tell within the natural reference range. So if you take natural individuals that produce their own testosterone, normal, healthy, unhealthy, whatever, and you test their cognitive performance on different tests, and then you measure their testosterone. Some studies show a positive correlation with testosterone. People with higher levels of testosterone perform better on some tests. And others actually show that people with lower levels of testosterone actually score better on some tests. And so kind of inconclusive from the literature that I've been able to find. But again, that is within the natural reference range. And we know from studies on anabolic androgenic steroids, which attach to the same receptors that if you just start taking testosterone attached to, it's going to do basically the same thing that a lot of the anabolic androgenic steroids do in the brain. And anabolic androgenic steroids taken at high doses have severe consequences on your brain. They shrink your brain substantially, and also they mess up the connections of your brain, and like a lot. And so taking even lower doses of testosterone hypothetically can actually lower your cognitive performance. It's true. You can try to debate me. There's not really any proof of it, but theoretically, based off of the mechanisms that we do know, it's safe to say that you will have a relatively benign drop in cognitive performance. Next one, balls equal broken. We kind of already went over this. If you inject testosterone, your balls are broken. That's just the way it is. Next one, no fertility. No fertility. So yeah, you will lose fertility. If you're taking testosterone replacement therapy, you can take what's called HCG, which is human chorionic gonadotropin, and you can keep your fertility. There's drawbacks to that as well. It's not a cure-all, and it's not a magic pill. But if you are actually clinically hypogonadal and you have a legitimate need for TRT, you can potentially keep or gain your fertility, maybe. But for people who just inject testosterone, you more than likely will eventually lose your fertility. Personally, I experienced this, actually, unfortunately. Next one, override of motivation, pursuit, reward pathways. So this gets into complicated stuff, and I really need to cover what we're about to get into to explain this. But for this section of the video, so testosterone, your body has a lot of different balances that it uses, and molecules that it attaches and controls and has feedback with testosterone. And specifically different motivation, pursuit, and reward pathways. So these are pathways that basically program your brain to desire, strive after, and work towards certain behaviors and outcomes, and not for other outcomes. And testosterone is a key molecule that's used in this natural balance of communication and control of basically what you do and what you're interested in and what you derive pleasure from. And because certain actions, just to illustrate this kind of in a more elementary and easy to understand way, if you go up and you talk to a girl, okay, and you get her number or something, your testosterone increases. You have an increase in testosterone, which is a positive feedback for your brain to say, oh, hey, you went and you talked to a girl, and you got her number. Maybe you met up with her, and you had a real good time. That is a positive feedback loop that teaches your brain over time to want to do that, okay? And actually winning in any situation actually increases testosterone. So if you're playing chess and you win, you have a spike of testosterone, and it's something that reinforces kind of when you get into the psychology and stuff. It's something that the psychologists will say basically maintains and reinforces social status and social order, and so kind of in a basic way of saying it, the top dog has the highest testosterone, but because of this positive and negative feedback loop, he's not the alpha because he has the highest testosterone. This is not true. He has the highest testosterone because he is the alpha, okay? And you might be like, Luke, what's the difference? Well, that's because you're an idiot. When you win, your testosterone increases. When you lose, your testosterone decreases. So people who win more just seem to have higher testosterone. And people who lose more just seem to have lower testosterone. And so, but if you're injecting your testosterone, you override all of that. So you get all of these negative side effects. So you're losing on all these fronts. But then every time that you do win, you don't get that physiological feedback that says that you won. And so your brain never learns that winning is good. And you, just like those rats that used chronic testosterone, they just explore less and they just do less, and they have higher levels of anxiety. And so this is kind of stuff that's kind of complicated and hard to prove in science, but it makes complete sense given things that we do know, and there's actual mechanisms that underlie it as well, so we know that it's true. And so if you're injecting testosterone, you get none of the benefits of feeling the downs of loss that push you towards not losing again, and you have none of the highs of winning that teach you that winning is good. Just the way it is. Okay, next one, tendency for substance use. So this is true. This is true. It's been a handful of days, maybe a week or two, since I was reading about this specifically. But with anabolic androgenic steroid use, we know that there's a positive correlation between anabolic androgenic steroid use and substance use tendency. And as a product of what we just talked about, this override of motivation, pursuit, reward pathways, we know that other things that basically cause the same sort of physiological effects of testosterone with respect to what we're talking about right now lead to higher levels of substance use tendency. And also some of the other effects of androgen use makes this make sense. And so basically in a nutshell, according to the literature, it can definitely be expected that if you are taking exogenous testosterone, if you're taking TRT, you will have a higher tendency for substance use. And that's physiological. So you will have a higher physiological drive to use substances over if you were natural. And that's just how it is. That's just how it is. I don't want it to be the case. I'm sure no one else wants it to be the case, but it just is. Number 10, brain shrinkage. So this is something, I should have a question mark next to that. So this ties in with the lower cognitive performance. Your brain shrinking on testosterone, it will, because the parts of your brain that produce gonadotropin releasing hormone, kisspeptin, follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone will in fact shrink because your body doesn't need them anymore. And so those parts of your brain will shrink, are kind of more important parts of your brain. You're going to shrink from TRT probably a little bit, because we know that they do with, and it's dose dependent with androgen use. But is it really going to be a meaningful effect? Probably not too much, although we do still have changes in your brain connections. Again, from this override of motivation, pursuit, reward pathways. So your brain will change. It will change. Is it going to shrink? Technically, maybe. Is it going to grow because you have more hypertrophy of the cells? Maybe. But are you going to lose brain cells? Well, maybe kind of technically. Is it going to be a huge effect if you're using smaller doses of TRT, like actual doctor prescribed TRT? Probably not really. But it's another thing to think about. And you are definitely going to have this override of physiological motivation, pursuit, reward pathways. Okay, lastly, unknown effects on internal clocks from non-pulsatile secretion. So this is circling all the way back. So basically, everything that I've talked about is stuff that has been noted on in the literature, and it does have underlying mechanisms that at least point towards this being true, if not just outright evidence. But this other thing, this unknown effect on internal clocks from non-pulsatile secretion. So your body has basically clocks. Okay, we all know about the circadian rhythm, and then there's other ones, and then there's epigenetic clocks, and there's a bunch of different clocks. Basically, it's just God's programming on how your body works in time. So again, normally you have this pulsatile secretion of testosterone, and it's a product of the pulsatile secretion of LH and FSH, which is a product of the pulsatile secretion of gonadotropin releasing hormone, which may or may not be as a product of kispeptin's pulsatile secretion. And kispeptin's kind of a new one. But your body's supposed to have this rhythmic ebb and flow, whereas when you're taking it, you don't have this rhythmic ebb and flow. And so when you inject it, you override this, and this could have downstream effects that we don't know about, or upstream effects through its cancellation of luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, kispeptin, and some other. So testosterone itself could be affecting certain clocks in your body that change your physiological, basically, time, thinking and time. Or it could be changing those things through those upstream pathways, which it definitely is. We just don't know what the side effects of that are. Okay, I'm really gonna hurry up. This is getting too long. Let's just try to briefly get through the effects of steroids. So all of these effects are just going to be worse with steroids. All previous to a lesser degree, likely dose dependent. I don't know why I said lesser, to a higher degree. With steroids, it's going to be everything else just on steroids, literally. But you do have some grounded in fact, just completely proven. It's been shown with MRI effects of steroids, and also through some cognitive tests. So steroids shrink your brain, and steroids make you dumber, and steroids also make you more emotional and less able to handle those emotions, in short. So they make you dumber, they make you less coordinated. So people talk about taking steroids to become more skilled in like a sport or whatever. Well, actually, steroids actually decrease your motor control, and it's because they shrink your brain in those specific areas that control fine motor movement, specifically your cortical gray matter, putnam gray matter, and basically just your cortex in general, but those specifically. So you're less coordinated, more anxious, as we already covered, and this is especially true with steroids, even over testosterone, which still increases anxiety. Worse hearing, this is true, and worse vision. So people on super physiological levels of androgens, steroids are all androgens. Testosterone is the endogenous or self-produced androgen, and steroids are basically supposed to be mimicking testosterone in the body. They attach to the same receptors, and so people who are taking super physiological levels of androgens, which means higher than what would be naturally, which everyone taking either TRT or steroids is, on cognitive tests, they on what's called spatiovisual tests, they performed worse than people not taking elevated levels of testosterone. Worse hearing, worse vision, and it makes sense with our MRI data because it lines up with specific brain regions that are associated with that. So that's the lowdown. Getting into some of the technical aspects. You have a shrunken cortical gray matter. So a quick ChatGPT search will show that your cortical gray matter is associated with thinking, planning, abstract reasoning, decision making, vision and hearing, and then voluntary movement. So that pretty much covers all of the effects that we just covered just there. So your cortical gray matter shrinks as a result of taking super physiological androgens. And again, this is going to be basically the same with TRT, just to a much lesser extent, again, dose dependent. However, I will say that based on my read of literature, nandrolone which is an anabolic androgenic steroid, was shown to be the most neurotoxic. Very bad. However, it was also shown that among individuals that take nandrolone, cardiovascular exercise actually seemed to combat a lot of the negative effects of nandrolone specifically. So if you are a bodybuilder or someone taking an nandrolone, it would be extremely advisable to do basically as much cardiovascular exercise as you can to combat the effects of nandrolone as much as you can. But these are just anabolic androgenic steroids in general. They all showed shrunken cortical gray matter, shrunken putnam gray matter, and putnam gray matter is associated with repeated behaviors. So this goes back to motivation, pursuit, reward pathways, repeated behaviors, skill learning. People say steroids help you with skill learning in sports or whatever. No, it doesn't. It actually decreases your skill learning. Motor habits, and then again, reward-based learning. And then this is the most. So this, your thinking and your planning, your decision making, your visual, your hearing, and your abstract reasoning is getting worse. But the scariest to me is this last point that we have, which is your amygdala. Your amygdala increases in size. Your amygdala gets bigger when you take anabolic steroids. Now, this is actually not good. You're like, Luke, your brain increases with steroids. What are you talking about? Well, your amygdala is colloquially referred to, it's more complicated than this, but it's colloquially referred to as your fear center, the fear center of the brain. So it is dealing with assessing threats and assessing anxiety-inducing things in your environment. And it is tasked with taking that information, so you get an emotional response from the amygdala, and then it is tasked with having the correct connections to other parts of the brain to process that emotional situation or anxiety-inducing situation correctly. So your amygdala gets bigger, so you have more tendency for emotional responses. But the connectivity to your hippocampus and cortex go down. So it becomes less connected to your hippocampus and cortex. And what this means is what I just said. You have higher emotional responses relative to a normal, healthy, natural individual, but you have less ability to process and react to that emotional situation. So you're extremely emotional in your response to whatever situation it is. Let's say you're walking around and you see a hot girl and you want to walk up to her, you know what I'm saying? But you're sitting there and you're super anxious. You're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do, and you don't know what to do. So you're more anxious than a normal individual would be, and you also don't know how to deal with that. Or let's say you get attacked on the freeway, or not on the freeway, on the bus or whatever. You're on the bus and someone attacks you. Well, you're going to be more fearful or possibly more aggressive. You're going to have, either way, you're going to have a higher emotional response, and you're going to have less aptitude, less ability to correctly respond to that situation. So basically, in a nutshell, it's like your girlfriend tells you that she doesn't like your mustache, and then you punch her in the face, or something like this, But that's the lowdown, guys. You can hate me, you can like me. The fact of the matter is that I've spent hours and hours researching this, and I mean, this is just what the literature says, and it's just true. All the literature talking about testosterone replacement therapy is meant for actually clinically hypogonadal men, okay? People who are actually hypogonadal, all right, have a serious medical condition. It's more than likely genetic. okay? Because if it's not genetic, it's something that we can modulate with lifestyle factors. And always in every situation, having a natural release of testosterone, being a natural, is always in every case better for you unless you're clinically hypogonadal, okay? It's just true. In no situation does taking testosterone exogenously help you, except if you want to have bigger muscles, okay? But it doesn't even make your muscles bigger, really. It just increases what's called sarcoplasmic growth in your muscles. And so if you want to get your muscles bigger, you have to take steroids, and we already know how terrible steroids are, because these are MRI data. Your MRI data shows that your brain shrinks, okay? And then also through I forget what test they use, but the connectivity of the amygdala to other parts of the brain goes down, which is just absolutely terrible. And this was not a small amount that this happened. This was like pretty extreme, actually, especially for the amygdala. The amygdala increases quite substantially, and the connectivity to other parts of the brain decreases substantially. It's really not good. But that's the lowdown, and yeah, so let me talk about how I got off of testosterone. How's the mustache look? Pretty good. Okay, so here we have how to come off of testosterone and or steroids. So again, me personally, I did it. It's been something like 3 months, just actually a little bit under 3 months just under 3 months since I took any form of androgen or hormone, and my testosterone is completely fine. I just got tested a few days ago, and I was at 515 nanograms per deciliter, and that test was done at around 11:25 in the morning. And I wake up relatively early, around like 8, and so hypothetically my testosterone might have been actually a little bit increased earlier in the day if I got tested a little bit earlier. So I'm sitting something around like, let's say 5.6 right now, which is it's exactly in the middle of the reference range. It's completely normal, and I feel completely fine. I feel great. I feel better than I did on steroids, on testosterone, and we're gonna get into that. So first, let's just walk through, before I start explaining some information, this is what my coming off of steroids and testosterone looked like. So I started using testosterone when I was 18, pretty much right when I turned 18. Started using started using actually SARM Rad 140, and then because I felt like crap after I came off that, I was like, frick it, let's just use testosterone for obviously the gym. And since then, so that's roughly 5 years of testosterone and steroid use, and man, it feels so good to be off. And it literally took 3 months, but it kind of technically took a little bit longer than that, but 3 months of any sort of like side effects from coming off of it. So at 1 year and 3 months before now, before I've completely recovered my natural production and feel better than ever, at 1 year, 3 months, I dropped my testosterone dosage to 80 milligrams per week. So before that, in the year before that, I used a bunch of steroids. I went on a cycle, and I used as much as I'd ever used. I got up to just over 1,000 milligrams per week. I'll throw some pictures up of what I looked like. I was looking pretty crazy. And I was strong too. I was only using 1,000 milligrams for a little bit of time, but I mean, I looked better than I ever did. The dosage, more dosage, the better you eat, and the more you train, the better you look. But I was just coming off of the most steroids that I'd ever done, and then after that, I went down to like 120 milligrams for a little bit, and then 1 year and 3 months before now, which is 1 year before I fully came off of testosterone, I went down to 80 milligrams per week, which is a low dose TRT. Most doctors, most people I think that get on TRT usually are on a higher dose than that. Usually I think the normal dose is like 100 to 120. So 80 milligrams was slightly below that, but some people take 80 milligrams for TRT and they're completely fine. And I also took some blood work around this time. We'll get into that in a second. So 1 year before coming off, I went down to 80 milligrams per week. Okay, and then at roughly 8 months before I came off, I went down to 60 milligrams per week, and still felt great through this whole time. I actually, after dropping to 80 milligrams per week, I actually felt better than I did at a higher dosage. That's actually the reason I started coming down, because I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, and I knew that steroids and testosterone androgens can cause anxiety. So I started lowering my dosage to try to combat the anxiety. And every increment that I went down, my anxiety actually went down with seemingly not really any negative side effect, except strength, slightly. But actually, I actually hit my heaviest ever squat at below 100 milligrams of testosterone. I was actually at, I believe, about 60 milligrams of testosterone per week when I doubled 405 on squat, completely raw. I had only ever hit 405 for 1 rep, and I doubled it easier than when I singled it. And when I first hit it, I was on like 750 milligrams of steroids, mostly testosterone. And I actually doubled it at 60 milligrams per week. What can explain that? I don't know. I really don't know. My diet was amazing. I was eating a bunch of deer. I was eating deer liver. So anyway, eight months before coming off, I went down to 60 milligrams per week. And then at roughly 6 months before coming off, I went down to about 50 milligrams per week. So as you can see, over the year before I came off, I just slowly went down in dosage. Okay, and there's a reason for this. I'm going to explain it once I get through this. So in here, right around this time, between 60 and 50 milligrams per week, I got my testosterone checked. I went to the doctor. I was thinking about coming off completely at this point, because I had realized that I was actually completely infertile, and that was just a no-no. It was that I was already kind of thinking about it before because of the anxiety. I wanted to get off of it, and also just for long-term health reasons. And I was thinking about like my future family, and I was thinking about, you know, like all the stuff we just covered, all the mental effects, and I was like, you know, how can I be the best dad to my future family? How can I be the best husband, you know, to my future wife? And how can I just be the best man overall? And how can I put myself in a position to be the best man for the future? You know, I'm a young guy. I'm 23. I got my whole life ahead of me. You know, just because I got on this when I was 18, and I thought I wanted to be a bodybuilder. You know, I hit all the numbers that I wanted to hit in the gym, and you know, I could have just kept going, but I didn't have that drive anymore. I hit all the numbers I wanted to. I got as big as I wanted to. I was as strong as I wanted to. And for me, I had nothing else to prove really to myself or to anyone else. And so for health reasons, I, around this time, started thinking about coming off, or around 8 to 6 months before I did come off. I made it my goal. I wanted to fully come off. I didn't know how it was going to go. I was worried about how long it was going to take. But I went to the doctor, got a appointment with the endocrinologist, and got my levels checked. And at 50 to 60 milligrams per week, I was at a 650 nanogram per deciliter testosterone level. And at that point, I felt pretty good. I felt better than I had before that. Before this, taking steroids increased anxiety. Also with intermittent euphoria from the steroids, because steroids are a drug. But after dropping every sequential drop of testosterone, even to 50 milligrams per week, I felt better. I felt better through the day. I felt more kind of natural, less anxiety. I felt more like myself, or like I could be myself, or just less anxiety, mostly, honestly. And again, around this time, 650 nanograms per deciliter was what I got tested at. And then after that, I continued lowering the dose to about 40 to 45 milligrams per week. And at that point, I started to kind of notice it slightly. I still felt good at 40 to 45 milligrams per week, at roughly 3 months before I fully came off. This is to now, and this is when I came off roughly 3 months ago. At around 40 to 45, I still felt good, but if I waited even an extra day to take another dose, I did feel it. And so I was hesitant to go any lower, because the decrease in anxiety that I felt from lowering the dosage kind of got canceled out by this effect where stress stressed me out more. I was more stressed out over things that shouldn't stress you out. So my stress tolerance actually went down, which makes sense, because at that dosage, I was getting kind of below where I am now naturally, even just after 3 months. I was getting probably below 500 nanograms per deciliter. I was getting in that low territory of like almost hypogonadal, and it didn't feel great. Although I still felt okay at this dosage. So at this point, I went to my endocrinologist, and I talked to her, and she wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get the medication that I needed to come off of it, HCG. I did end up getting HCG, but it was around around 3 months before I did come off. I spoke to the endocrinologist, and she told me to continue lowering my dosage. And she told me it was good that I had been lowering it, and it is, and I'll get into that in a second. I've been lowering my dosage, and she told me to continue lowering it. I told her I was a little bit worried about it, because any lower than what I was at around 40 milligrams, I could feel the side effect. But after speaking with her, she told me she was going to see if she could get me the medication, HCG, for free without having to pay for it, see if my insurance would cover it. And so I did continue lowering it. I lowered it down to approximately 25 milligrams per week at the time that I came off. So I went down from 40 to 45 down to 30 to 35. And then after that, I went to like 20 to 30. And then the last week or two, I was basically at zero. I stopped pinning. Actually, I ran out. The vial that I had, I ran out. And so I just stopped using it. And I still didn't know if I was going to get the HCG. So I actually ordered another vial of testosterone. And then just like 1 or 2 weeks after being at basically zero, my endocrinologist called me, and she said that I had the HCG and it was headed to my pharmacy, and I was ecstatic, but I was also really worried because I had a bottle of testosterone in the mail about to get to me in a couple days, but then and at this time I was on like 20 milligrams per week, and I was feeling like crap, and now I had the HCG come in, so now I knew that I couldn't pin any more testosterone. So I was really worried, and I thought that I was gonna feel like shit for the next, like maybe 6 months or a year. And I was really not looking forward to it. I was really worried about it. But I prayed, and I was like, this is what I want, this is what I have to do, this is the consequences of what I've done, and this is just what I have to do. I'm just gonna have to make it through it. Luckily, none of that bad stuff that I thought was gonna happen happened, and it was actually basically seamless. Praise to God. But so I got the HCG, and then I took a week off with nothing, and I was already on basically nothing. So I was pretty much at zero, pretty much basically literally, when I started the HCG, which is human chorionic gonadotropin. And what human chorionic gonadotropin does is it mimics LH and FSH, and those are the molecules that your pituitary produces to tell your balls to make testosterone and also to make sperm. And human chorionic gonadotropin mimics these. I could get into the complex kind of biopharmaceuticals of it. Basically, it has the alpha subunit of the compound. Protein. It is identical to both luteinizing hormone and a follicle stimulating hormone. The beta subunit is slightly different. It's the one I got was derived from females' urine. Actually, they take pregnant women and they extract this HCG out of their pee. It's the same molecule that when girls pee on a pregnancy test, it's the molecule that the test picks up on to see that the women are pregnant. Yeah, serious stuff. So this is actually what I was taking was extracted from pregnant women's urine, which kind of like spiritually or like esoterically is kind of like a weird thing. It's like, I mean, it's literally weird, but it's also like, damn, like you're injecting pregnant women's urine. Pretty crazy. But that's normal clinical treatment for coming off of hypogonadism and trying to get your pituitary to work again. Trying to get your balls to work again, to start telling your pituitary to work again. So right after coming off of testosterone, at 0 milligrams per week, I was pretty much completely cleared out. I had no testosterone in my system. I started taking HCG at 2,000 international units every other day. I had 30,000 units in total, and I was taking 2,000 units every other day. And as soon as I started taking the HCG, the negative side effects of the testosterone pretty much went away. I felt like crap when I had no testosterone, obviously, for those couple weeks that I was at 0 or slightly above 0. I felt terrible, bad. And then as soon as I started taking HCG, my mood elevated. I felt fine. I felt like I didn't have testosterone, but I didn't feel bad. It seemed to buffer the negative side effects of the testosterone. I want to butt in and put a little aside into this video right here. So when I went off of the testosterone, when I had no testosterone, I pretty much had 0 sex drive, and of course my downstairs also didn't work. So those are not mutually, those are independent. So you can have a high sex drive and your thing not work, or you could have your thing not work, but you wouldn't really know because you don't have sex drive. When I was on no test, I had no sex drive, thing didn't work because I didn't have a sex drive. And then on the HCG, I had actually pretty much the same, so pretty high sex drive on the HCG. But I did have ED. So I would have a high sex drive, but my thing wouldn't work too well. So there is that. It would work, but it'd be hard. But anyway, aside from that, I never lost libido or really had too much erectile dysfunction. I haven't heard any or seen any literature talk about this effect. But for me, during the like 1 or 2 months that I was taking HCG, it was like a month and like a week or something, I felt fine. I did everything normally in my life. I felt way better than the week or two that I was on nothing. Completely buffered the negative side effects. And then when I came off of the HCG after like a month or so, I felt pretty much fine still. I came off of it and I was still pretty much good. I felt less robust than I do now, at a higher level of testosterone presumably, but I still felt fine, basically. And then after that month, over the next 2 months, it was just a steady climb up. After 2 months of fully coming off, I felt completely fine. I felt just the same as I do now. After 2 months, I think I was completely recovered. And the only real time period that I ever felt like bad, or like anything that was like, this kind of really sucks, was like 2 weeks. And that was the clean out time where I cleared out all the tests right before I started HCG. And I felt completely fine. So from this period, when I completely went off, I felt terrible right here. Then I start the HCG right here and I feel fine. And then I come off the HCG and I still feel pretty much fine. And then right to this point now, since the past like 2 months, I've felt pretty much fine. Better than I ever have. More vital, more energy, nothing negative really to say. And so yeah, so let's talk about why I tapered. So we talked about before the study in mice where lower levels of testosterone given to the mice still showed production of LH and FSH. Well, this makes sense because the shutdown of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone that signal to your balls is done by the testosterone. So if you have a high level of testosterone, your brain gets a signal that it doesn't need LH and FSH. But if hypothetically, if you are at a lower level, then your brain will have less negative feedback, and it will basically have more of an inkling to produce LH and FSH. There's not really any literature, at least that I've read. I can't say that I've particularly looked hard for literature on this because it just makes sense, right? I mean, if you're trying to come off of something, it's always better just to, if you're not going to completely stop, to lower it, right? And so presumably over this time period, my body had been slowly recovering and slowly at least sorting itself out to a point that when it did become zero that I was injecting, it was ready to start making it itself. Whereas if I went straight from, let's say, like taking like a super physiological dose of testosterone, if I just went straight to nothing, presumably my body would go from like no signal to produce to needing to produce it, but it's not ready and it's not producing anything. So the clinical implications for lowering the dosage aren't exactly like teased out in the literature. However, my read of the literature, it makes complete sense that it would be good to taper the dosage. So anyone looking to come off of testosterone, and this was exactly my endocrinologist's advice to me, so it kind of corroborates what my read of the literature and what I'm thinking about it, is it's going to be better to taper your dosage, okay? If anything, just to get your mind from this high androgenic state to a lower androgenic state, and so your receptors are more sensitive.
So when you do start producing even little amounts of testosterone, they will actually be able to exert their effect on the receptors, whereas if they're desensitized because you're taking a bunch, now you drop to nothing, now they're desensitized and you have none, and it's just not a good time. So multiple reasons really to taper your dosage. Lastly, I'll say for HCG, people talk about using enclomiphene as well because it can stimulate GnRH production. Personally, I didn't use enclomiphene back when I first began using steroids and testosterone at 18. I tried to post-cycle therapy with Clomid, and I got really bad negative mental side effects from it. I don't know if it was a product of me being 18 or it was a product of using the SARMs, or if it was the Clomid itself. I'm pretty sure it was the Clomid because it's known to have some side effects for people. There's a new drug called enclomiphene that supposedly it's basically a modified version of Clomid, which is the older version, and it's supposed to not have as bad of negative side effects. So enclomiphene, if you wanted to look into using it, it's supposed to be kind of the fixed version of it. You just want to make sure to tell your doctor to get enclomiphene and not clomiphene. But that's something as well that you can use. I would recommend using enclomiphene after your HCG. Most the literature that I've read talks about, and people talk about using enclomiphene before you use HCG. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why you would use it before. I would use it after. But that's something to speak with your doctor with, read the literature on. But you can't use enclomiphene, whichever you want. I didn't. I just use HCG, 2,000 milligrams or 2,000 IUs every other day for around about a month. I used 30,000 milligrams in total. I didn't use the exact prescribed dosage. Roughly midway through, I took 6,000 milligrams on one dose, and then for the next week or so, I took 1,000 milligrams per dose. I was just kind of experimenting with the effects of it. But I had no real negative side effects. I felt fine the whole time, and on the average, I took about 2,000 IUs every other day, and it worked for me. And like I said, a couple days ago, I got my test checked. My balls are physically bigger. They're hanging now, and I feel like more of a man than ever. So that's how they come off steroids, guys. And I've been using steroids since I was 18. I've used for 5 years. I tried Tren. I used Dianabol. I used a lot of Winstrol. And a lot of tests the whole time I was on test. The highest I ever got was just over 1,000 milligrams per week. And that was for a short time. Most of my cycles were 5 to 6 100 milligrams per week. I did that probably twice a year for that whole time period. And all the time in between, I was on 100, 200 milligrams of test. And in 2 months, I completely recovered. My read of the literature actually says that that's not really uncommon. Most of the people on YouTube, whoever I hear talk about this, even doctors, mostly not doctors, the influencer stuff, I hear them talk about it's going to take years to come back. It's going to be years before you come back, if you even come back. Actually, if you read the literature, it's actually not really uncommon. Most of them talk about recovery in months as opposed to years. Now, if you've used for 20 years, yeah, it might take you a year or even 2, maybe. But even still, there was one study, I can't quote the exact specifics, but the median age or the median duration of use for anabolic androgenic steroids was 152 weeks. That was the median, and most of them came back, recovered their production mostly in months, less than a year. And again, the median duration of anabolic androgenic steroid use was 152 weeks. So that's it's 3 years or something, was the median. And and most of them came back relatively quickly. It's possible that you won't be able to come back, but if you're under the age of 30, dude, and you've used for 5 years even, or less, or even a little bit more, I came back in 2 years, man. Or 2 months. So there's hope, and I gave you all the reasons to come off and why you wouldn't want to use it. Anybody thinking about coming on TRT, definitely think about these things, and think about the fact that testosterone does not decrease with age. And 50-year-olds with healthy lifestyles that ate healthy and exercise regularly had higher test levels than people in their 20s, males in their 20s, who didn't have a healthy lifestyle. So something to think about, but I hope you guys learned something.